Want to welcome everybody to this presentation. We're going to be talking about the role of plant health and integrated pest management. If people do have questions, my email is simply shawn.wright@uky.edu. You can always reach out to me that way as well. I encourage you to be in contact with your local county agents as well as a first source of contact as well. But if there's something they can't help you with, they'll reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll go from there as well. In terms of our IPM, this is a definition that comes from the USDA. It's kind of long and wordy, but I'll read it just so we're all on the same page. Integrated pest management uses current, comprehensive, research-based information on the life cycle of the pest in combination with available pest management methods to manage damage in the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and environment. And it's long and wordy, as I said, but it does encompass all the things that we're trying to do. It's current information. We're not relying on stuff that's outdated. We're not getting rid of stuff that we've known for 40 years, but we're always trying to use the most current information that we have to provide people information that they need for managing pests. Comprehensive, it's not just focused upon pesticides or varietal resistance, things like that. It's comprehensive. It desires to be all-encompassing. There's always new things to learn, but we try to encompass everything we can into it. It's research-based as well. There's a lot of trade journals, popular articles out there that talk about various pest management techniques that aren't based on science at all. The information that you are getting from the University of Kentucky, your county agent, and that is research-based, and we want to focus on that because it has been tested. We know that it works, or if it doesn't work, and so that's why we use the research-based information. It's not focused on just a specific part of the pest, but it looks at the whole pest as a whole unit, from in the case of insects, from egg to adult, or if we were talking about integrated weed management, we're talking about things from seed to mature plant, integrated disease management. All these things, different pests have different management strategies, but whether the pest is an insect, a disease, a fungus, or a weed, we're still endeavoring to use an integrated pest management strategy for managing these. With available pest management methods, there are some methods. I think my training, a lot of it was in weed science for my PhD research and things, and there were pesticides, herbicides specifically, that were available years ago that are no longer available. So even though I may know things that worked very well for managing weeds, they're currently not labeled and probably won't ever be again. So we don't emphasize things that did work years ago, but we can no longer do, because we're always trying to do what is legally allowed. Have to emphasize that the pesticide label is a legal document. If you go off label, you're violation of the law. So don't ask your agent, and don't ask the specialist, don't ask people to make recommendations that are off label. So even if you've heard something from your neighbor, and this is important if you're in any of our border counties or that, you may hear from your neighbors across the river in Indiana or Illinois, or over in West Virginia, Virginia, down in Tennessee, that they can do certain things, and you say, well, why can't I do that in my state? Because pesticides have state registration labels as well. So we can only recommend what is currently labeled for use, registered for use in Kentucky. So just keep that in mind as well. And we're always trying to consider economic costs. We're all dealing with inflation. Things are getting more expensive. Farmers are always dealing with the slim profit margin. So we're trying to do things most economically. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to eliminate all pests. We're going to try to keep them at a level in which they are below the economically damaging threshold. Once it becomes more cost effective to deal with the pests than the damage that they're causing, we'll make recommendations. But if their cost of the treatment is more than the cost of the damage, we're not going to do that. We're only going to recommend when it makes economic sense to be making a treatment if necessary. And of course, we're always focusing on the least possible hazard to people, property, and environment. So again, emphasize, make sure you're wearing your personal protective equipment when you're engaged in pest management practices. The pesticide label has the recommended pesticides that are on that as well. It will talk about buffer zones to protect the environment, protect your neighbors, things like that. So read the label. If you do have any questions, make sure to contact your county agent or one of the specialists, and we can help you out with questions you might have regarding that. A couple more terms. Resistance and tolerance refers to a plant's ability to overcome the effect of a pathogen. I'll defer to Dr. Gauthier on that. But my understanding is that resistance specifically is the reduction of the pathogen in or on the host. So you have less spores on the plant, or in the case of a weed, you would have less weeds, less weed seeds released and things. Whereas tolerance is a lack of damage despite significant pathogen levels. So if a plant was infected with a fungus, it might have very high levels of the pathogen, but it doesn't show damage because it's tolerant. So that's my understanding. Just keep in mind that there is no variety out there that's resistant or tolerant to all diseases or insects or weeds or anything else. Breeders, one of the main things they look at, of course, is resistance to diseases, but they also look very closely at holding characteristics and yield as well. It used to be years ago that quality of produce, flavor, and that was more important, but those things have dropped off. But resistance is important. If a plant isn't resistant or tolerant to certain important diseases, the chances are it won't get released. But if a breeder develops a plant, I worked with an individual who had a passion for breeding black raspberries, and he was based in Colorado, developed a primocane bearing black raspberry. I went to a lot of effort to get it patented and that and released it, but it hadn't been tested in the East, and it was determined that it wasn't tolerant at all or resistant to certain disease issues and things. So occasionally plants will be released that are bred for a certain market or that, but generally breeders are looking for things that will encompass a wide range of the United States or whatever environment they're breeding it for specifically. We do have an IPM pyramid, just like the old food pyramid that used to talk about. The base of the pyramid are where we have our cultural practices. These are the things that I'm going to be talking about, primarily plant health. Is the encompassing term that relates to that, but site selection, crop selection, soil management, water, sanitation, fertility, those things have very low levels of potential for environmental impact. If you're selecting a certain variety, it's not going to have a big effect on the environment relative to a different variety. But as you work your way up that pyramid, the various activities as you go up will have more impact on the environment. Mechanical control, you have the potential for destroying the soil structure, so that can be an impact. As you go up to biological agents, biocontrols, there's always concerns with those, whether it affects other plants as well, and certainly pesticides, there you're at the level where we could certainly have significant impacts on the environment as well. So what I'm talking about are the things at the base of the pyramid here. First thing that you need to do is have healthy plants, which means plants that are appropriate for the region. Most of Kentucky is actually a zone 6B. We have a certain region here in Western Kentucky that's a 7A, and then there's little pockets of 6A in southeastern Kentucky here, and then along northern Kentucky we have a little bit of pockets of 6A up in here as well. But when you're looking to purchase a plant, make sure that it's hardy for the region. So 6B is the hardiness zone that you're looking at. If you are an adventurous gardener and want to try things that are a little bit more ambitious, you can certainly try and push that a little bit. I will mention there is an organization out there called the North American Fruit Explorers, NAFEX.org. They're a group of individuals that have a passion for fruit. And if you have a passion for fruit and want to get involved with people that like to challenge things and just have different interests in that, you can certainly check out their things. There's some individuals I know on there that are really trying to push some of the subtropical plants more up into the zone 6 and even zone 5 regions and things. So, but normally your first step is pick a plant that's appropriate for the region. Pick the appropriate site for your plant. Most fruit plants prefer a well-drained, not compacted soil. You can get your soil tested by your agent. Many of our agents have soil penetrometers where they can check to see how compacted the soil is. Daniel is going to be talking about soil testing as well. So I'm not going to get into that, but make sure you get your soil tested. We always like to look to make sure there's enough organic matter in your soil. Most of the soil test results I've seen don't have enough organic matter, and organic matter is important in having good structure to your soil, which helps it to drain. If you do have a poorly drained site, you could tile it, or you could add organic matter to the soil. I like to see people put up a shallow raised bed for small fruits specifically, even if it's just 3 inches above the surrounding soil height. That alone will make a significant difference in allowing the soil to drain, will help cut down on your root rots and things in your plants as well. Avoid frost pockets, low-lying areas. Remember, cold air is heavier than warm air, so it will settle in these low-lying areas. That's what this figure is meant to illustrate. Here in eastern Kentucky, where I'm based, our commercial orchards are actually up on the ridge tops, which if you just thought about it real quickly, you would say, well, why would you put it up there? But that's because in the spring, when we're worried about a late frost, the warm air rises to those ridge tops as the cold air settles. So our ridge tops are actually the warmest parts in the spring, where we're worried about a late frost when our plants are in bloom. If you are near a large body of water, the Kentucky River, lake, a large pond or something, those bodies of water will also help hold heat in the spring and release it, will provide you a little bit of protection as well. But avoid those low-lying areas that are subject to cold air settling as well. Airflow is very important, will help cut down on diseases as well. So if you have something that's blocking air, if you can thin out things, if you can move some plants around in that to get better airflow through your planting, that will make a huge difference in helping to manage diseases. Most of our plants prefer sunny sites that get at least 7+ hours of sun. Grapes can do okay in partial sun. Our ribes genus, the currants and gooseberries, are native understory species and can tolerate partial shade as well. But full sun is better than partial shade, and partial shade is better than no sun at all. If you don't have sun, you're going to have to grow things in pots. You know, you could grow plants in pots and move them around. Some of our older individuals that used to have large gardens that don't have the physical abilities that they used to have can grow plants in pots and move them around. I was talking with somebody at a meeting last night who moves her container garden around her house as the sun tracks around her house and well during the day. So you can do that as well. Access to water is important. Often we get enough rain in Kentucky that summer droughts aren't that common. It does happen occasionally. So you want to have water available if you're going to need it, because remember that most of our fruit crops, the fruit itself is mostly water. So without water, you're not going to have fruit. Be aware of any wild plants that may harbor insects and diseases. This is important. I'm thinking like brambles and things. There's a lot of wild blackberries in people's environment and things. If you're growing apples and you're concerned with cedar apple rust, the spores from the fungus can blow from a cedar tree to an apple tree. So be aware of what plants are upwind from where your site is, because as the wind blows from those wild plantings downwind towards your planting, they could be bringing in insects like aphids, they could be bringing in fungal spores. Just be aware that if you have the potential to clean out some of those wild plants around you, that's going to go a long ways towards improving the overall health of your plants, decrease the amount of pesticides that you might have to use as well. People are going to say, well, how far do I need to clean out? That's somewhat limited by how close your neighbors are. You don't need to go to excess. I do believe I've heard that the spores from cedar apple rust can blow for up to half a mile. I'm welcome to be corrected on that if I'm wrong, but some things, things like aphids and that aren't going to blow for half a mile typically, but you certainly don't want to put your planting right next to a weedy hedgerow that your neighbor isn't maintaining at all. Healthy plants, we do have a publication, the home fruit variety recommendations. We last updated this in 2019. The plants that are on this list are different than their commercial recommendations because one thing that we do look at on here are things that have been proven good for home gardeners. They also have good flavor. We get a lot of these recommendations from our master gardener volunteers that grow fruit and things. Anybody that has recommendations for us, we like to take those and evaluate those as we update those. This publication is available, and we can get that link into the chat for people if they want it. Otherwise, this recording, this presentation is going to be recorded as well, or you can certainly just go online and Google this publication, Home Fruit Variety Recommendations, and it will come up on our website as well as a PDF. Daniel Becker was the lead author on this publication. This is very important for any of our tree fruit. Select rootstocks that have been proven successful and are appropriate to the site. I'm not going to say any more about that. He's the lead author on that. Excellent publication. I encourage you to get that. If you do have questions about rootstocks, Daniel will be happy to discuss that at some point with you as well. Probably be a little tight on time to cover that today, but I know he's always willing and available to talk to people about that as well. Wealth of information is there. They do the rootstock evaluations over there at Princeton, where he is based. Establish and maintain your plant's property. As I said, Daniel's going to be talking about fertility, planting, when and how plant your plants appropriately. Often people will put a $30 plant in a $5 hole. Make sure that you have an adequate planting hole for your tree fruit, for your small fruit plantings. If you're planting strawberries or something like that, make sure that things are planted properly. Often we see strawberries planted with the roots bent over and things. So just make sure that you do it right. Typically in Kentucky, we prefer spring planting for most of our fruit crops. If you were further north, where I grew up in Western New York, we like fall planting, but we usually got 90 to 110 inches of snow a year. So we could plant in the fall. The soils were warm. We would get good root growth. We would have a lot of snow cover. It would insulate those soils from freezing, from that heaving and thaw cycle. Here in Kentucky, we don't get that. So if you plant in the fall, there's always the potential for that freeze thaw heaving of the plants that will break the roots and things. So typically we like spring planting in Kentucky. There's usually adequate rain in the spring as well. Prune properly, renovate when you need to your strawberry plantings and things. Make sure your tools are clean. Sanitation is critical. Don't be spreading disease from diseased plants to healthy plants. Always start with your healthy plants first and then go towards your less healthy plants. But sanitation is critical. That can be a whole nother talk. I believe Dr. Gauthier and Dr. Besson are going to be talking about insects and diseases at the next session of this as well. So I'll leave it at that. Mulching and vegetation. I hate to see people using string trimmers around trees. They do a lot of damage. Don't do this volcano mulching. That's not good for plants either. Wildlife management is important. The figure on the left side of the screen shows vole damage. They had tree guard up around the tree to prevent string trimmer damage, prevent deer rubbing, but they neglected the fact that the voles came along and ate the bark off of the roots of the tree and killed the tree. On the right-hand side, you see deer rub. Deer love those stems that are just about the size of a broom handle. They're ideal for rubbing the velvet off their antlers and things. Rabbits will also come along if we do have snow cover and will girdle your plants as well in the spring. So just be aware of what wildlife you've got around. Fencing is a good method for controlling wildlife. There are other methods as well. Matthew Springer is our wildlife management extension specialist, has a lot of good publications on that as well. One of the last things I wanted to talk about, just because we see this quite a bit in publications now, the use of biological stimulants to overcome a yield gap. Yield, the USDA definition of a biological stimulant, is a substance or microorganism that when applied to seeds, plants, or the rhizosphere, which is the root system, the root environment, stimulates natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, or crop quality and yield. These are various hormones, acids, microbials, extracts, and things like that. My own personal bias towards them is I think they can work in an ideal situation. These are the things that my best growers and that are going to talk about, because these are the things that will give you that 5%. Unfortunately, my experience in extension over the last 35 years almost tends to be that people will gravitate towards these things because they get a lot of interest in the trade, but they'll neglect the simple things like soil testing, like selecting the proper plant and things. So don't spend, these are the things that will give you that extra 10% boost at the end, that last final 10%. Focus on getting the first 80 to 90% right, and then focus on use of these biological stimulants and things. Lastly, I just wanted to put up this website for you. We do have an integrated pest management site for fruit crops at the College of Agriculture at UKY. It's ipm.ca.uky.edu/fruit. A whole wealth of information on that. I'm not going to go through the individual links just because we could spend a day just going through those individual things. I encourage you to check that out. Check the quick links on the sides with the disease models. And the last thing that I do want to point out is that number at the bottom of the screen. Everybody should have that in your phone bookmark just in case. It is the poison hotline number, 1-800-222-1222. That's the number that you call if you have a pesticide, a poisoning emergency. For those that are old enough to remember Mr. Yuck, that's the number that will get you to that. So with that, I will end here. Be happy to try and take any questions that anybody might have.